The Second World War was the war, the big one, WW2. It was arguably the most important event of the 20th century and one of the milestones in human history. It was also one of civilization's lowest points, with our oldest cultures and our newest technologies geared up for the unprecedented slaughter of our fellow human beings. Hello, I'm Robert Mitchum. Tonight, we will remember that war and all its horror and humanity with a behind-the-scenes look at a motion picture as monumental as the events it captures before the camera. This film is War and Remembrance, based on the Herman Wouk novel. As a young ex-naval officer, Wouk became one of the new American voices to come out of the war with his account of courage and cowardice, the Caine Mutiny. But Wouk's major work was ahead of him. The two sprawling novels of an American naval family, The Winds of War and War and Remembrance. These books join classics such as Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead and James Jones's From Here to Eternity to give us a record of those times by the men who were there. Through their eyes, we look at the slaughter and sacrifice and perhaps make some sense of it. Most importantly, we remember. In this country, we go so far as to think of this as the last good war.
Such is our nature, that we can look back on moments when we very nearly died and remember them with nostalgia and pleasure.
So wrote James Jones in his personal history of the war, WW2. Films such as War and Remembrance can do more than simply entertain. They can remind us that our world is fragile, our peace precious.
The beginning of the end of war lies in remembrance.
A living history will return in a moment.
To feel that it's 40 years ago seems extraordinary. I can't believe that. It seems to be only yesterday.
Sir John Gielgud on the set of War and Remembrance.
I remember it so vividly, and one lived all through it. It's everything. It's so extraordinary that people who find that so much in the past, they're hardly interested. So I suppose it's very important for a young audience to be aware of what really happened.
That war that we collectively remember so vividly has a unique hold on us, an almost romantic attraction. Perhaps that's due to the image created by those hundreds of books and motion pictures made about every imaginable aspect, every theatrical operation, every human dimension of this horrible time. But until now, there has been nothing written or filmed to compare with the scope, the size, the proportions of the movie called War and Remembrance. At 30 hours, it is not only the biggest movie ever made about the Second World War, it ranks as just about the most monumental motion picture ever put before the cameras.
It's an enormous undertaking. I don't think I've ever been in a film on this scale before.
Sir John Gielgud joins a distinguished international cast that includes Jane Seymour, Art Bachner, John Rhys-Davies, and joining me in reprising their roles from The Winds of War are Chaim Topol, Polly Bergen, and Victoria Tennant.
I saw a reflection in the mirror as the makeup and the hairstyle went on, of Pamela coming back, and I looked at the end of it, and well, there she was. It was startling. I hadn't seen her for 5 years.
I'm here, and if you want me to stay, I will. I want to. I love you. To me, you're life itself. And if you want me to go, I'll go. But you must say so. I can't go on like this.
And I'm too old for you.
Never.
Combined with the 18 hours of 1983's The Winds of War, War and Remembrance makes up a living document of this most important American experience. An almost 50-hour chronicle of the whole world at war. Producer-director Dan Curtis.
The Winds of War, in a strange way, was nothing more than a prologue to it, and that the real story was War and Remembrance.
5 years in the making, filmed in 10 countries over 21 months, employing 44,000 actors, extras, and bit players, War and Remembrance was as huge and complicated an undertaking as some of the battles it depicts.
Torpedoes! Torpedoes on the port bow, bearing 350!
We'll just pick up where we left off at Pearl Harbor, and then we'll take it right through to the end of the war. And this is where our people really get involved. This is the main story.
After Pearl Harbor, the nation was in shock. We were dropped overnight into a state of war, but it looked like we were coming in on the losing side. Most of Western Europe, the Balkans, and North Africa had fallen. Britain was isolated, its civilian population under fire. Russia was under siege, suffering casualties in the millions. In the Pacific, except for our carriers, our fleet was in ruin. Later that December, Wake Island and Hong Kong would fall. In February, Singapore. In April, Bataan. In May, Corregidor, then Burma. On May 7th, the day after General Wainwright surrendered the last of the American and Philippine troops at Corregidor, a Japanese invasion convoy was steaming toward New Guinea. Then something unique happened. 2 of our carriers intercepted the Japanese on the doorstep of Australia in a place called the Coral Sea. For the first time in history, 2 carrier fleets fought it out with aircraft alone. We lost the Lexington, but her sister ship, the Yorktown, survived, and the Japanese invasion had to turn back. It was our first victory. The Yorktown was back at Pearl Harbor by May 27th, facing 3 months of repairs. But after only 48 hours, the hastily patched up Yorktown was secretly steaming back to sea for what would be one of the most important battles of the war. The Battle of Midway was the turning point in the Pacific War for the U.S., and it was one of Dan Curtis's biggest challenges.
There's a great deal of pre-planning on this one. 2 enormous naval battle sequences. I mean, just dealing with those alone, it's like making 2 gigantic features. It's going to require the giant building of miniatures, endless construction of that type of stuff.
The battle footage shot for War and Remembrance is unprecedented in its scope. Actual battle footage combined with scenes shot on existing Navy ships, augmented by specially constructed miniatures. Production designer Guy Comtois on this phenomenal process.
We're trying to do all the sequences on the real ships. If we're missing something, we will build a miniature to match what we know is correct and what we're missing in our shot. We're talking about some of them being as long as 100 feet long. The reason we're using that size is because we need to get the wave proportion.
War and Remembrance also contains compelling footage of submarines under attack.
Shooting actually 45 days on board a real Second World War submarine. Once we tow it, we'll be actually in open sea with it and doing the battles on the open sea.
Action. When I finished The Winds of War, I felt that I had gone through a war myself and I didn't want to go through it again. And I knew that this one was going to be a much longer, much more complicated, much more difficult show. The thing that finally turned me around completely was that I always knew in my heart that I wanted to finish the story, and that was a story that had to be finished.
Actress Jane Seymour, who plays the role of Natalie.
No one was ever wishy-washy about Dan Curtis. They either loved him or they hated him. And so I decided I wanted to see for myself what he was like. And my first reaction was that some people could have been unnerved by him because of the intensity of his feeling about the project. And to me, this was the most exciting thing about him, is I realized that he was as passionate about the project as I was.
British actor John Rhys Davies on location at the Birkenau concentration camp.
Dan Curtis is a remarkable man and a remarkable director. Nobody else would have the guts or the foolhardiness to try and carry through a piece of this magnitude.
What makes War and Remembrance unique Beyond the massive scope of its undertaking is its uncompromising treatment of the blackest chapter in man's inhumanity to man, the systematic slaughter that will be forever known as simply the Holocaust.
In order to make sure that something like this never happens again, it has to be remembered, and it has to be remembered the way it really was. And to do it in any lesser way is a crime and an injustice.
Sometimes in Auschwitz, I had that feeling that place should be erased from the world.
Israeli actor Chaim Topol.
My father and my mother are both from Poland. They are the only two survivors of their families. The entire family was exterminated. My mother's in Auschwitz, where we shot. And my father's in Treblinka, which is not far from Warsaw. I wanted my father to come with me when I knew I was going to play the part to shoot in Poland. And he couldn't do it. I mean, he wouldn't do it.
The filming of the actual concentration camp scenes within the walls of Auschwitz and Birkenau, where so many millions of Jews, Poles, and Gypsies and other enemies of the Third Reich were murdered, had a sobering, sometimes devastating effect on the cast and crew.
Every actor, I think, when they come into this place, has to say to himself, could I have survived here? I couldn't have survived. I'm not deep down tough enough to have survived Auschwitz.
We wanted to come here from the first day we knew it was even vaguely possible, because I believed it truly would bring an element that shooting on the set could never bring. And it has.
My mother was in a camp. My father has family who died in Auschwitz and in Belsen. And I spent a great deal of time talking to them about their experiences with the war. I was in Auschwitz. I was shooting there. I was surrounded by the ghosts of 5 million people. I defy anyone not to be able to get into that character under those circumstances. It's so real. It's scary.
For one member of the crew, this was not his first time in Auschwitz. As a boy, associate producer Branko Lustig was an inmate here.
When I started to work on this project, and I spoke with Dan about all what we want to do, and when I read the novel, I feel that I must do it because, you see, I think things like this cannot happen anymore, and doesn't happen anymore, and we make this picture exactly for this reason, that things like this never happen again. And that's the most important thing why I'm here and why I'm putting so much effort that everything must be like it's in my remembrance of 40 years ago.
We're not going to make up one thing. What these people are going to see, what this audience will see, is what actually happened. And it is beyond words. I can't describe it now. And I propose to attack it in such a way that it will never, ever be forgotten, and no one will ever be able to say again, what was that all about?
He was a lean, trumpet man from my Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else would play.
We do remember this war. It does touch us in some fundamental way. We might even dare to say that we feel good about it. Not about the carnage, the slaughter of the innocents, the terrible waste, but good about ourselves as a people, as a nation. We were challenged and we rose to that challenge. We were asked to fight and die, and we did. If we remember this trying time with any fondness, it is because the America of 1941 is how we would like to think of ourselves as a people, ready to fight in a good cause on behalf of those less able to defend themselves. What we don't always remember is that on the eve of Pearl Harbor, not all Americans were ready or willing to get caught up in the rest of the world's fight.
This time America should keep out, and I know I will. If war breaks out in Europe, I think that this country should heed the advice of its first president and avoid all foreign entanglement. Let Europe fight her own battles. They mean nothing to us.
But Europe's battle and China's battle would become ours soon enough. The papers and newsreels told us of the vicious slaughter of civilians half a world away, in Shanghai, Warsaw, London. But by 1941, the world we knew, the world in which we felt safe, was getting smaller and smaller. The beginning was, for Americans, as clear-cut as the bombardment of Fort Sumter in 1861, or that first shot fired at Lexington Green in 1775. It was perhaps more devastating because the camera was there to record it. The radio was there to report it.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Like a green foot soldier, wondering if he has what it takes on the eve of battle, America had to summon all the courage it could and face the onslaught. After Pearl Harbor, there was no choice. We were going to war. As the industrial capacity of Europe was being destroyed, America geared up. Factories that had been producing sedans and locomotives began cranking out Sherman tanks and armor-piercing shells. America's shipyards produced tonnage at a dizzying speed. 6,500 Navy ships, 5,400 cargo ships, and over 60,000 landing craft. One yard alone was cranking out one escort aircraft carrier per week by 1944. For all their vaunted military supremacy, the Nazis and the Japanese were doomed by what we used to call good old American know-how. The stormtrooper and the warlord were finally ground into the dust by Rosie the Riveter. But what about the American fighting man? Would our young citizen soldiers be able to shoot it out with the Japanese with his warrior code, or the German with his tradition of Prussian militarism and the Nazi myth of the super race? If our well-trained enemies had any doubts, they could, in the language of the times, tell it to the Marines. Author Norman Mailer wrote in his classic novel, The Naked and the Dead.
All through the convoy, there was the knowledge that in a few hours, some of them were going to be dead.
In the Battle of Midway, just 6 short months after Pearl Harbor, the pilots of our Navy torpedo bombers displayed a reckless bravery that had an honor code all its own. Flash the other plane, Jim. Urgent. Sighted enemy cruiser scout plane.
Aye, aye, sir.
Radar confirms the bogey, Admiral. We're picking up strong voice transmissions in Japanese. He's sending a sighting report, that's for sure.
I see. Obviously, our edge of surprise is rapidly melting away.
Unaided by surprise or a fighter escort, the pilots from the Yorktown, the Hornet, and the Enterprise went in against the strength of the Japanese fleet in broad daylight. 10 of 14 planes from the Enterprise were lost. 10 more from the Yorktown's 12, and all 15 of the torpedo bombers off the Hornet. Although one pilot was pulled alive from the sea. Author James Jones wrote,
No Japanese kamikaze pilot later in the war ever went to his death more open-eyed or with more certain foreknowledge than these men.
This miniseries, War and Remembrance, is a tribute to that spirit, that selfless bravery. A tribute to the people who fought and to the innocent people they fought for, the victims of this last good war. When we look back on the complex events of the Second World War, we tend to see them as something simple. something wonderfully clear and clean-cut. Each age looks back at moments of history and remembers them through the perspective of the present. After the frustrations and disappointments of Vietnam, of Watergate, of hostages in the Middle East, the age of World War II looks pretty good. Our choices were so easy. We knew who the bad guys were, we fought them, we beat them, and the world thanked us. We see how the world looked to us then, and it seems a bit naive and simplistic. But their world was not so simple. It was a time of valor, bravery, and perseverance in the face of unspeakable horrors, insurmountable odds. It took the sacrifice of millions of lives. If we remember those times, it should be with a sense of awe of what was accomplished to give us the world we inhabit today. I'm Robert Mitchum. Thank you, and good night.